The alarm clock rang at 6 in the morning, just like it had every day for the past 8 years. Minji Kim opened her eyes and stared at the white ceiling of her small apartment in Seoul. The room was quiet, except for the sound of cars passing by on the street below. She lived on the 4th floor of an old building that had no elevator. Every morning she walked down those stairs, and every evening she walked back up. Minji sat up slowly and looked at herself in the small mirror on her nightstand. Her black hair was messy from sleep. Her face looked tired even though she had slept for 7 hours. She was 31 years old, but sometimes she felt much older. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the person she used to be. She got out of bed and walked to her tiny kitchen. The apartment was small, with just 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that was barely big enough for 1 person. She made coffee in an old coffee maker that took 5 minutes to brew a single cup. While she waited, she looked out the window at the busy street. People were already walking to work, carrying bags and talking on their phones. Everyone looked like they had somewhere important to be. Minji opened her refrigerator and took out a piece of bread and some strawberry jam. She had been eating the same breakfast for months. Sometimes she would have an apple or a banana, but mostly it was just bread and jam. She ate quickly while standing by the window, watching the world wake up outside. After breakfast, she went to her bedroom to get dressed. Her closet was full of gray and black clothes. She had 3 gray suits, 2 black suits, and several white shirts. Today she chose a gray suit with a white shirt. She put on black shoes that were comfortable but not stylish. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror by her bedroom door. She looked exactly like every other office worker in Seoul, but that was the point. Minji wanted to look ordinary. She wanted to blend in with the crowd. She wanted people to forget her face the moment they saw it. For 8 years, this plan had worked perfectly. She picked up her brown leather handbag from the chair by her bed. The bag was old and worn. The corners were scratched and the zipper was loose, but she had been using it for years. Inside the bag were things that would seem normal to anyone who looked. There was her wallet with her ID card that said Minji Kim. There was her phone, some tissues, lip balm, and a small notebook where she wrote down grocery lists and reminders. But hidden in a secret pocket inside the bag were other things, things that told a different story about who she really was, things that could change everything if anyone ever found them. Minji walked to the subway station like she did every morning. The streets were crowded with people rushing to work. She walked past the same coffee shop, the same convenience store, and the same flower vendor. The old woman who sold flowers always smiled at her, but they never spoke. Minji preferred it that way. The subway station was packed with people. Everyone was wearing dark clothes and looking at their phones. Minji bought her ticket from the machine and walked to the platform. The train to Gangnam District would arrive in 3 minutes. She stood in line with dozens of other passengers, holding her bag close to her chest like she always did. Minji worked at Hansung Insurance Company on the 15th floor of a tall building in Gangnam. She had been working there for 6 years as an accountant. Her job was to check numbers and fill out forms. She was good at it because it was quiet work that did not require her to talk to many people. Her desk was in the corner of the office, away from the windows. She liked it there because she could see everyone, but no one paid much attention to her. Her co-workers were polite, but they did not try to become her friends. She ate lunch alone at her desk almost every day. When her co-workers invited her to dinner or drinks after work, she always said she was too tired or too busy. Her supervisor, Mr. Kang, was a kind man in his 50s who never asked her personal questions. He gave her work to do, and she did it. Well, sometimes he would say good morning or ask about the weather, but their conversations never lasted more than a few minutes. This was exactly how Minji wanted it. The only co-worker who sometimes tried to talk to her was Junho Park. He was about her age and worked in the insurance claims department. Junho had a friendly face and always smiled when he saw her in the elevator or in the break room. Sometimes he would ask if she wanted to join him for lunch, but she always politely declined. Junho seemed genuinely nice, but Minji could not risk getting close to anyone. She had learned that lesson the hard way many years ago. The closer people got to her, the more likely they were to discover her secret. And her secret was something that could destroy the quiet life she had built for herself. As the train arrived at the platform, Minji thought about her day ahead. She would check insurance forms until lunchtime. She would eat a sandwich at her desk while reading a book. She would work until 6 o'clock and then take the train home. She would buy groceries at the small market near her apartment. She would make dinner and watch television until it was time for bed. It was the same routine she had followed for years. It was boring and lonely, but it was safe. Safety was more important than happiness for someone like her. Someone who was hiding from a past that could never be forgotten or forgiven. Minji stepped onto the train and found a spot near the door. She held onto the metal pole with one hand and kept her other hand on her bag. The train was so crowded that people were pressed against each other. She could smell coffee and perfume in the morning air that clung to everyone's clothes. As the train started moving, Minji closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for another ordinary day. She had no idea that this Tuesday would be the day when her carefully constructed world would fall apart completely. She had no idea that before the sun set, everyone would know exactly who she really was. The subway train moved through the underground tunnels toward Gangnam District. Minji held onto the metal pole and watched the dark walls rush by through the window. The train car was so full that people were standing shoulder to shoulder. She could hear conversations in Korean and English mixed together. Someone was listening to music through headphones. Another person was talking loudly on their phone. Minji noticed Junho Park standing about 10 feet away from her. He was wearing a navy blue suit and reading something on his phone. Sometimes he would look up and glance around the train car. Once their eyes met for a second and he gave her a small smile. She looked away quickly and pretended to be interested in an advertisement on the wall. The train made its first stop at Hongik University Station. Many students got off and a few more office workers got on. The doors closed with a soft beeping sound, and the train started moving again. Minji checked her watch. It was 8:15 in the morning. She would arrive at her office at exactly 8:30, just like she did every day. The train was picking up speed as it traveled through the longest section between stations. This part of the journey usually took about 4 minutes. Minji was thinking about the insurance forms waiting on her desk when she heard a loud grinding sound. The lights in the train car flickered for a moment. Suddenly, the train began to slow down very fast. Too fast. The brakes were making a terrible squealing noise that hurt everyone's ears. People started to look worried and began talking to each other. Minji felt her stomach drop as the train continued to slow down in a way that did not feel normal. Then it happened. The train stopped so suddenly that everyone was thrown forward. People who were standing crashed into each other. Those who were sitting slid off their seats. Briefcases and bags went flying through the air. Someone screamed. A woman fell down and her coffee spilled all over the floor. Minji lost her grip on the metal pole and stumbled forward. She tried to catch herself, but there were too many people around her. Her shoulder hit a man in a gray coat and she felt her bag slip from her hand. She watched in horror as her brown leather handbag flew through the air and hit the floor of the train car with a loud thud. The old zipper that she had been meaning to fix for months finally gave up. It burst open completely, and everything inside, her bag scattered across the dirty floor of the subway car. Her wallet slid under a seat. Her phone landed near someone's feet. Tissues flew everywhere like white butterflies. But those were not the things that made Minji's heart stop beating. It was the other items, the secret items that were now lying on the floor for everyone to see. Several people immediately bent down to help collect her things. It was what Korean people always did when someone had an accident like this. They helped without being asked. But as they picked up her belongings, Minji watched their faces change from helpfulness to confusion to something that looked like recognition. Junho was one of the people who bent down to help. He picked up her wallet and was about to hand it to her when he noticed something else on the floor. It was a newspaper clipping that had been carefully cut out and folded. The headline was in large letters, but from where Minji was standing, she could not see what it said. She did not need to see it. She knew exactly what it said because she had read it 1,000 times. A middle-aged woman in a red coat picked up several photographs that had spilled out of a small envelope. The photos were old, and the colors were faded, but the images were still clear. Very clear. The woman looked at the photos, then looked up at Minji, then looked at the photos again. Her mouth opened in surprise. An older man in a business suit was holding what looked like an official document. It had stamps and signatures on it, and Minji could see him reading it carefully. His eyebrows went up as he read, and he glanced at her with a strange expression. More people were gathering around now. They were not just helping to pick up her things anymore. They were looking at the items with curiosity and growing excitement. Someone was holding another newspaper clipping. Someone else had found a small notebook with handwriting in it. Minji wanted to push through the crowd and grab everything, but her legs felt like they were made of stone. She could not move. She could only watch as her 8 years of careful hiding came to an end in the most public way possible. The train was still not moving. The conductor's voice came over the speaker, saying something about a technical problem and asking passengers to remain calm. But Minji was not listening to the announcement. She was watching Junho as he picked up a photograph that had landed face down near his feet. He turned the photograph over and looked at it. For a moment, his face showed no expression at all. Then slowly, understanding began to appear in his eyes. He looked at the photograph again, then looked directly at Minji. She could see him comparing the face in the picture to her face. Other passengers were doing the same thing. They were holding photographs and newspaper clippings and looking back and forth between the items and Minji. Some of them were starting to whisper to each other. She could not hear what they were saying over the noise of the broken train and the conversations of confused passengers, but she could guess. A young woman with long black hair was holding her phone and looking at one of the photographs. She seemed to be searching for something on the internet. Her thumbs moved quickly across the screen. After a few seconds, she found what she was looking for. Her eyes grew wide, and she showed her phone screen to the person standing next to her. Minji felt like she was going to be sick. The secret compartment in her bag had opened completely. 8 years of hiding were spread across the floor of a subway car in front of dozens of strangers and her co-worker who saw her every day at the office. She finally found the strength to move her feet. She pushed forward and began trying to collect her things, but it was too late. Too many people had seen too much. The damage was done and there was no way to undo it. As she bent down to pick up her scattered belongings, Minji knew that her life as an ordinary, invisible office worker was over. The question now was what would happen next. Hyunwoo Lee was having a normal Tuesday morning until the train stopped so suddenly that his coffee spilled all over his newspaper. He was 45 years old and worked as a manager at a bank in Gangnam. He had been taking the same train to work for 12 years, and nothing like this had ever happened before. When he saw the woman's bag burst open and her things scatter everywhere, his first thought was to help. His mother had taught him to always help people in trouble. So he bent down and started picking up the items that had landed near his feet. The first thing he picked up was a tissue packet. Normal. Then he found a lip balm that had rolled under someone's shoe. Also normal. But the third item he picked up made him stop and look more carefully. It was a photograph. An old photograph that looked like it had been taken at least 10 years ago. The picture showed a young woman on a stage with bright lights all around her. She was wearing a sparkling silver dress that caught the light in 100 different ways. Her hair was long and wavy, and she was holding a microphone. Behind her, Hyunwoo could see thousands of people in an audience, all of them cheering and holding up signs. The woman in the photograph looked happy and confident. She was smiling a big smile and her eyes were shining. She looked like she owned the whole world. But there was something familiar about her face, something that made Hyunwoo look more closely. He glanced up at the woman who was trying to collect her scattered belongings. She looked embarrassed and scared. Her face was red and she was moving quickly, trying to grab everything before more people could see. She was wearing a plain gray suit and flat black shoes. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. She looked like any other office worker in Seoul. But when Hyunwoo compared her face to the face in the photograph, he felt his heart start to beat faster. The eyes were the same. The shape of the nose was the same. Even the way she held her mouth was the same. He looked at the photograph again. In the bottom corner, there was a small logo that said, Seoul Music Awards 2015. Above the logo, in white letters, were the words, Stella Moon, Artist of the Year. Hyunwoo felt like someone had hit him with a brick. Stella Moon. He knew that name. Everyone in Korea knew that name. She had been one of the biggest K-pop stars in the country. Her songs had been #1 on the charts for months. Her concerts had sold out in minutes. She had been on television shows and in magazines and on billboards all over Seoul. And then, suddenly, she had disappeared. Hyunwoo remembered the scandal. It had been all over the news for weeks. Something about her manager stealing money and lying to her about contracts. There had been rumors about other things, too. Bad things. The entertainment companies had turned against her. The media had written terrible stories about her. And then one day, she was just gone. No more concerts, no more songs, no more Stella Moon. That had been 8 years ago. People had wondered what happened to her. Some said she had left Korea. Others said she was living in hiding somewhere. But no one had seen her or heard from her since then. Until now. Hyunwoo looked up at the woman again. She was still trying to collect her things, but more people were helping now, and more people were starting to notice what they were picking up. He could see other photographs in people's hands. He could see newspaper clippings with headlines about Stella Moon. He could see official-looking documents with her real name on them. "Wait a minute," Hyunwoo said out loud. His voice was not very loud, but in the quiet train car, several people heard him and turned to look. "Wait a minute," he said again, this time louder. The woman looked up at him with fear in her eyes. She knew what was coming. She had probably been dreading this moment for 8 years. "You are Stella Moon," Hyunwoo said, and his voice carried throughout the entire train car. The effect was immediate. Everyone who had been helping to pick up her things suddenly stopped moving. People who had been talking about the broken train suddenly went quiet. Even people who had been looking at their phones looked up to see what was happening. "You are Stella Moon," Hyunwoo said again, holding up the photograph so everyone could see it. "The singer, the one who disappeared." A young woman standing nearby gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. An older man adjusted his glasses and squinted at the woman in the gray suit. A teenager with a school backpack pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. "No," the woman said quietly. "No, my name is Minji Kim. I work at an insurance company. You are making a mistake." But even as she said it, more people were looking at the photographs and newspaper clippings that were still scattered on the floor. The evidence was everywhere. Pictures of Stella Moon at concerts and award shows. Articles about her music career. Headlines about the scandal that had ended everything. Jun-ho Park was still holding one of the photographs. He had worked with this woman for 6 years. He had said good morning to her hundreds of times. He had invited her to lunch dozens of times. He had always thought she seemed sad about something, but he had never imagined anything like this. "Oh my God," said a woman in a business suit. "It really is her. Look at the eyes. Look at the shape of her face. It is definitely her." More people were pulling out their phones now. Some were taking pictures. Others were searching the internet for old photos of Stella Moon to compare them with the woman standing in front of them. The train car was getting noisy as people started talking excitedly to each other. "I loved your music," said a young man with a messenger bag. "Your song Dancing in the Stars was my favorite. I listened to it every day in high school." "What happened to you?" asked an elderly woman. "Why did you disappear? We all wondered where you went." The woman who used to be Stella Moon looked around the train car at all the faces staring at her. Some looked excited. Some looked curious. Some looked confused. But all of them were looking at her, and she could not hide anymore. For 8 years she had been invisible. She had been nobody. She had been safe. Now, in the space of 5 minutes, all of that was gone. The train was still not moving, and she was trapped in a metal box with dozens of people who now knew her secret. People who were taking pictures and asking questions and remembering things about her past that she had tried so hard to forget. Minji Kim, who had once been Stella Moon, closed her eyes and wondered what was going to happen next. The train car had become completely silent except for the sound of people breathing and the occasional beep from someone's phone. Everyone was staring at the woman who had been hiding in plain sight for 8 years. She stood there with her hands, shaking, surrounded by the scattered pieces of her secret life. A young woman named Eunmi had been one of Stella Moon's biggest fans. She was only 24 now, but she remembered being 16 and saving all her pocket money to buy concert tickets. She remembered crying when Stella Moon disappeared. She had always wondered what really happened. Eunmi picked up one of the newspaper clippings from the floor. The headline read, "Stella Moon accuses manager of stealing millions." The article was from a newspaper dated March 15, 2017. She read the first few lines out loud so everyone could hear. Famous singer Stella Moon held a press conference yesterday to accuse her manager Taehyun Choi of stealing money from her concerts and lying about her contracts. She claims that Choi has been taking 70% of her earnings instead of the 20% stated in their agreement. Eunmi looked up at the woman in the gray suit. "You tried to tell the truth," she said quietly. "You tried to expose what he was doing to you." An older businessman picked up another newspaper clipping. This one was from 2 weeks later. The headline said, "Stella Moon's career in ruins after false claims." He read parts of it aloud. Entertainment industry leaders are calling Stella Moon's accusations against manager Taehyun Choi completely false. 3 major record companies have announced they will no longer work with the singer. Concert venues across Korea have canceled her upcoming shows. More people were finding more clippings and reading them. The story became clearer with each piece of paper. Stella Moon had discovered that her manager was stealing from her. She had tried to expose the truth, but instead of people believing her, the entire entertainment industry had turned against her. Junho found a legal document that looked official and important. It had stamps and signatures all over it. At the top it said, "Contract fraud investigation, closed." He read the summary section. "After a 6-month investigation, we found evidence that manager Taehyun Choi did alter contracts and steal money from artist Stella Moon. However, due to pressure from major entertainment companies and lack of witness cooperation, this case is being closed without prosecution." "They knew you were telling the truth," Junho said, looking directly at her. "The investigation proved you were right, but they closed the case anyway." The woman who had been Stella Moon finally spoke. Her voice was very quiet, but in the silent train car, everyone could hear her clearly. "Taehyun was not just stealing money," she said. "He was also controlling everything about my life. He told me what to wear, what to eat, who I could talk to. He said if I ever tried to leave him or speak against him, he would destroy me." She looked around at all the faces watching her. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others looked angry. "When I finally found proof of what he was doing, I thought people would help me. I thought the truth would set me free. But Taehyun had friends in powerful places, other managers, record company executives, television producers. They all worked together to make me look like a liar." A middle-aged woman found a folder full of photographs. They were not performance photos like the others. These pictures showed a much sadder story. There were photos of Stella Moon looking very thin and tired, photos of her with bruises on her arms, photos of her crying at what looked like business meetings. "He hurt you," the woman said softly. "This man hurt you." "Not just physically," Stella Moon replied. "He destroyed my reputation. He spread rumors that I was difficult to work with. He told lies about my personal life. He made sure that no one in the entertainment industry would ever hire me again." Another person found a small notebook filled with handwritten notes. The pages were covered with names, dates, and dollar amounts. It looked like Stella Moon had been keeping careful records of everything that had happened to her. "You have been investigating this whole time," said a young man who worked in law enforcement. "You have been collecting evidence for 8 years. Stella Moon nodded. "I never stopped trying to clear my name, but every time I got close to finding a lawyer who would help me or a journalist who would tell my story, something would happen. They would suddenly change their minds. They would say they could not help me after all." "Taehyun was threatening them," Eunmi said angrily. "He was scaring people away from helping you." "Yes," Stella Moon said. "So I gave up trying to be famous again. I just wanted to survive. I got a fake identity and found a quiet job. I thought, if I could just be invisible, maybe he would leave me alone." The train car erupted in voices. People were angry about what had happened to her. They were asking questions about the other people involved. They wanted to know if Taehyun Choi was still working in the entertainment industry. He is now one of the most powerful managers in Korea, Stella Moon said sadly. He represents some of the biggest stars in K-pop. Everyone thinks he is a great businessman. No one knows what he really is. People were taking pictures of the newspaper clippings and legal documents with their phones. They were posting on social media and calling their friends. Word was spreading beyond the train car. Junho looked at his coworker with completely new eyes. For 6 years he had thought she was just a quiet accountant who liked to be alone. Now he understood that she was a survivor. Someone who had been through terrible things but was still fighting for justice. "Why did you keep all of this evidence?" he asked her. Stella Moon looked down at the scattered papers and photos on the floor. 8 years of her life were spread out for everyone to see. "Because someday," she said, "I hoped the world would be ready to hear the truth." As people continued reading her story from the clippings and documents, it became clear that this moment on the broken train might be that someday she had been waiting for. After hearing Stella Moon's story, the train car remained quiet for several long moments. People were looking at their phones, reading the documents, and processing everything they had just learned. Stella Moon stood in the middle of it all, waiting for what she had feared for 8 years to finally happen. She expected people to turn away from her. She expected them to whisper behind her back like they had done before. She expected judgment and blame, because that was what had happened every time someone discovered her secret in the past. But something different happened instead. Soo-young Nam, a 26-year-old office worker, was the first person to speak. She had been standing quietly near the back of the crowd, but now she pushed forward until she was directly in front of Stella Moon. "I was 15 when your album, Midnight Dreams, came out," Soo-young said loudly, so everyone in the train car could hear her. "That album got me through the worst time in my life. My parents were getting divorced and I felt like my world was falling apart. But your songs made me feel less alone." She looked around at all the other passengers, her voice getting stronger and more confident. "When you disappeared, I never believed the terrible things they said about you on television and in the magazines. I always felt like something was wrong with the story. Now I know I was right." An elderly woman named Mrs. Park, who was in her 60s, nodded her head in agreement. "I have a granddaughter who loved your music," she said. "She used to dance around our living room singing your songs. When you disappeared, she cried for days. She said it did not make sense that someone who made such beautiful music could be a bad person." More people began to speak up. A man in his 30s talked about how Stella Moon's concerts had been the first place where he felt brave enough to express himself. A young mother said that listening to Stella Moon's songs had helped her get through difficult nights with her newborn baby. "You were never the problem," said a college student who looked about 20 years old. "The problem was the men who hurt you and the system that protected them instead of protecting you." Junho stepped closer to his coworker. For 6 years he had wondered why she seemed so sad all the time. He had wondered why she never wanted to make friends or have fun. Now he understood that she had been carrying this huge secret and fighting this battle all by herself. "I don't care what your name used to be," Junho said firmly, looking directly at her. "For 6 years you have been the kindest, most hardworking person in our office. You always help new employees when they don't know what to do. You stay late to finish projects so the rest of us don't have to work overtime. You bring extra food to share when someone forgets their lunch." He turned to face the other passengers. "This woman has shown me nothing but kindness and integrity. If she was brave enough to stand up against corruption 8 years ago, then she deserves our respect, not our judgment." People around the train car began nodding and murmuring in agreement. Someone started clapping, and soon many others joined. And the sound filled the small space and echoed off the metal walls. A businessman in an expensive suit was looking at something on his phone. "I just searched for Taehyun Choi online," he announced. "He is still managing some of the biggest stars in K-pop. His company is worth millions of dollars. Meanwhile, his victim has been hiding and working as an accountant just to survive." "That is not right," said a woman carrying a baby. "That is not justice." Yoonmi, the young woman who had been Stella Moon's fan, was also looking at her phone. "I am posting your story on social media right now," she told Stella Moon. "I have 50,000 followers and I'm going to make sure they all know what really happened to you. I am calling my cousin who works at a newspaper, said another passenger. She writes investigative stories about corruption. She will want to hear about this. I know a lawyer who specializes in entertainment industry cases, offered a middle-aged man. He has helped other singers who were cheated by their managers. I can give you his phone number. Stella Moon looked around in amazement. She had spent 8 years expecting the worst from people. She had been hiding because she thought everyone would judge her and blame her if they knew the truth. But these strangers on a broken subway train were responding with kindness and support, instead of judgment and shame. Why are you being so nice to me? She asked, her voice shaking with emotion. 8 years ago, everyone turned against me. They believed the lies instead of the truth. 8 years ago, people did not understand how powerful men abuse their power, said Mrs. Park. 8 years ago, people were not ready to listen to women who spoke out against men who hurt them. But things are different now. The world has changed, agreed Soo-young. People are more willing to believe women who tell the truth about abuse and corruption. The internet makes it harder for powerful people to control the story. A man who worked in television production spoke up. There have been many scandals in the entertainment industry in recent years. People have learned to be suspicious when someone disappears suddenly after speaking out against their management. You were ahead of your time, said the college student. You were trying to expose these problems before society was ready to hear about them. But now we are ready. People were continuing to share the story on their phones. They were taking pictures of the evidence that had spilled from Stella Moon's bag. They were calling friends and family members to tell them what they had witnessed. The train conductor's voice came over the speaker system, announcing that the technical problems had been fixed and the train would start moving again in a few minutes. But nobody seemed to care about getting to work anymore. They were all focused on the woman who had been hiding among them for years. What do you want to do now? Junho asked her. You don't have to keep hiding anymore. You have people who believe you and want to help you. Stella Moon looked around at all the faces surrounding her. For the first time in 8 years, she did not see judgment or suspicion. She saw support and determination and hope. I want to tell the whole truth, she said quietly. I want everyone to know what really happened, and I want to make sure this never happens to another young singer. The passengers cheered and clapped again. The train began to move forward, carrying them toward a future that none of them had expected when they woke up that morning. By the time the subway train finally reached Gangnam Station, everything had changed. The videos and photos that passengers had taken were already spreading across the internet faster than anyone could have imagined. Within 2 hours of the train stopping, the hashtag Justice for Stella Moon was trending on social media platforms throughout Korea. Yoonmi had posted a long message on her social media account, along with photos of the newspaper clippings and legal documents. Her post was shared thousands of times within the first hour. People were commenting with their own memories of Stella Moon's music and expressing outrage about what had happened to her. When Stella Moon and Junho arrived at their office building, there were already 3 news reporters waiting outside. Someone had called the media and told them where she worked. The reporters had microphones and cameras, and they wanted to interview her about her story. Miss Kim, called out one of the reporters. Or should we call you Stella Moon? Can you tell us what really happened 8 years ago? Stella Moon stopped walking and looked at the cameras. For 8 years she had avoided all attention. She had tried to be invisible. But now, standing in front of the building where she had worked quietly as an accountant, she realized that hiding was no longer an option. My name is Minji Kim, she said clearly. But I used to be a singer called Stella Moon. I have a story to tell, and I think it is time for people to hear the whole truth. The interview lasted for 30 minutes. Stella Moon told the reporters everything about Taehyun Choi and how he had stolen her money and destroyed her career when she tried to expose him. She showed them copies of the legal documents that proved the investigation had found evidence of his crimes, even though the case had been closed without prosecution. The interview was broadcast on the evening news that same day. By the next morning, it had been viewed over 2 million times online. Suddenly, everyone in Korea was talking about Stella Moon and what had happened to her. But the most surprising thing happened on the second day after the subway incident. Other singers and entertainers began coming forward with their own stories about Taehyun Choi and other managers like him. Ji-hyun Park, a popular K-pop singer who was currently managed by Taehyun's company, held a press conference. She was only 22 years old, but she spoke with courage and determination. After seeing Stella Moon's interview, I realized I am not alone, Ji-hyun said. Taehyun Choi has been taking 60% of my earnings instead of the 30% in my contract. He has also been controlling every aspect of my personal life. He chooses my clothes, my food, and even who I am allowed to talk to. Within a week, 6 more singers came forward with similar stories. They all described the same pattern of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and threats. Some of them were currently signed with Taehyun's company. Others had worked with him in the past, but had been too afraid to speak out. The Korean government announced that they would reopen the investigation into Taehyun Choi's business practices. This time, they said, they would not allow powerful people in the entertainment industry to interfere with the legal process. 2 weeks after the subway incident, police arrested Taehyun Choi at his office. They also arrested 3 other managers and 2 record company executives who had been part of the scheme to silence Stella Moon and other victims. The entertainment industry, which had once turned against Stella Moon, now began to change its attitude completely. Record companies that had refused to work with her 8 years ago were suddenly calling her representatives and asking if she wanted to make music again. But Stella Moon had different plans. She used the money she had saved over 8 years of working as an accountant to start a foundation called Voices for Truth. The foundation provided legal help and emotional support to entertainers who were being abused or exploited by their managers and record companies. "I don't want to be famous again," she explained in another television interview. "I want to use my experience to help other people who are going through what I went through. I want to make sure that young singers have someone to turn to when powerful people try to hurt them." Junho became one of the first supporters of her foundation. Even though she no longer worked at the insurance company, they remained close friends. He helped her with the business side of running the organization, using skills he had learned in his insurance work. "I always knew there was something special about you," he told her one day, as they were setting up the foundation's office. "You were always so kind to everyone, even when you were carrying such a heavy burden by yourself. Now I understand where that strength came from." Many of the passengers from the subway train stayed in touch with Stella Moon and supported her foundation. Soo-young donated money and volunteered her time to help with the foundation's social media accounts. Mrs. Park brought her granddaughter to meet Stella Moon, and the little girl told her that she was proud of her for being brave. Yoonmi became the foundation's communications director, using her social media skills to spread awareness about abuse in the entertainment industry. "You saved my life when I was a teenager by making beautiful music," she told Stella Moon. "Now you are saving other people's lives by fighting for justice." 6 months after the subway incident, Taehyun Choi was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud, theft, and intimidation. The judge said that his crimes had damaged not only his direct victims but also the entire Korean entertainment industry. On the day of the sentencing, Stella Moon stood outside the courthouse with reporters and supporters. She was wearing a simple black dress and no makeup, but she looked more confident than she had in years. "This is not just about me," she told the reporters. "This is about creating a world where young artists can pursue their dreams without fear of being exploited or abused. This is about making sure that truth is more powerful than money or influence." As she walked away from the courthouse, Stella Moon thought about the morning 8 years ago when her life had fallen apart, and the morning 6 months ago when her bag had burst open on a subway train. Both moments had been terrifying at the time, but both had led her to where she needed to be. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer afraid. And she was finally free to use her voice for something more important than fame or fortune. She was using it to help others find their own voices and their own freedom. The woman who had spent 8 years trying to disappear had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to be seen.